Has your marketing plan ever included the production of a music or rap album? Well, Raj has, and he's just dropped his debut album, an album talking about B2B SaaS. And who even does that in the first place? Is it just, though, some harebrained creativity gone wild, or is there some method to this madness? This is just something we had to get the scoop on, and it doesn't matter if you like music, rap, or Raj's tracks or not. In this episode, you'll learn about a few mediums all rolled into one, and it starts with audio or sonic branding. Then it goes into how to craft a sales pitch in the context of startups, but you could use this for anything. And then it finishes with a discussion around events. But of course, there's a heavy layer of strategy throughout, and after listening, you'll understand how all these things link together. After all, this is one of the hallmarks of good strategy, a coherent set of actions. And yes, you'll learn about how to pitch a business idea or a startup idea to investors. And yes, you'll learn about how to design a good event, and you'll learn some secrets behind music and creative production as well. But the most important learning here is exactly how Raj uses this music he's produced to drive value and achieve business goals. And that story is the most interesting one that no one else has discussed with him until now. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you like this episode. Raj Nathan, aka Raj Nation. Okay, welcome to the show, Raj. How you doing?
I am doing great.
Now, your new album just came out. I was just listening to it. And can you just tell me a bit more about where that sort of came from?
It has been an idea years in the making. I originally had the idea to do a startup themed rap album in like 2017. Funny enough, there was actually this competition in Chicago being put on by one of the newspapers called the Big Idea Awards. And it was kind of like an open call for like submission of like, what's your big cool idea? And I literally saw the flyer for it like the afternoon that the submissions were due, like that night, I think, or the next morning they were due. And again, it had been brewing for some time, like, oh, I want to make this startup rap thing, a concept. So I went to the studio and I recorded a single track, and it was something I had been working on it for a bit, and all I needed to do was just lay the audio down. That song was called Wake Up, Raise Up. I actually borrowed/stole a Timbaland beat for that. And the song was kind of an ode to female founders and the struggle that they face raising capital in a predominantly male investing world. And that was my submission into the Big Idea Awards. And then lo and behold, I actually made it in as a finalist. There was this big event for it. And I didn't win the whole thing, but a lot of people were interested. Like, there was people liked the song, and I actually even added a second song just for my display at the event. But at that time, my thought was more like, if I do a rap album, it's going to be like Schoolhouse Rock, but for startups. So I'm going to teach pitching, I'm going to teach sales, I'm going to teach marketing, but through rap music. And then over time, I sat on the idea forever. And then finally it came a time where I met the right people and had the amount of time in my schedule. And I had built enough experience over the years to where me as a founder had built up enough experience. And then with our company working alongside other founders had gleaned enough experience from them to be able to write lyrics and music that would be really powerful and meaningful. And it didn't need to be, almost like naturally. I don't think there was a specific moment where I was like, oh, it's actually not going to be teaching concepts. It's just somehow naturally it just became, I'm writing music that is me being the voice of this person, not me trying to teach this person. And that's how the album came together. And goat to market being the title, that's a term I came up with about a year ago. And we built an entire kind of brand platform around goat to market. And now the album kind of serves as the anchor to the entire platform.
It's interesting because, a lot of people start with maybe writing or video in terms of that sort of side of content production, but audio is generally more of an afterthought. It's kind of like, well, we'll finish the production, the video, and then, we'll put some kind of track onto it at the last minute, and, they'll get some B-grade stock music or something and maybe some sound effects. But, then I've listened to other sorts of podcasts or videos, and they do a really good job with the audio. You kind of watching the difference between like a B grade movie and maybe something done by Hans Zimmer. The difference in the two movies are like Light and Day, for example. When it's the main part of the production, it really changes, I think, the quality perception of the whole experience, I think. And it sort of puts you into a whole new level. And this, some people might use this word sonic branding or audio branding. The thing that Intel has, that little soundbite, the ding, 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 or Microsoft, or even Apple has them. And we don't even notice these things. But then there's also backing tracks and music tracks as well. And, some brands have really used and attached their brand to a particular song that sometimes has been around and just it's been sampled or it's been redone, and that's what they use. And I think a lot of people cheapen out on that track and that audio sometimes because maybe it costs money, but you've gone and created your own, and you can use that in lots of different ways. So which ways are you using these tracks you've now produced, or little bits of them?
Digital content we've been posting, like to promote the album or to promote the big release week that we're doing called Hype Week. We can drop the instrumental of one of the beats into a video. I actually even have an MMA league reaching out wanting to use the instrumental for like the lead into their programming. So it's not only are we able to use it for our own purposes, but also there are potentially now there are other brands or entities that want to get in on this and have the music represent their property as well.
So when you were doing this audio production or the sampling or little parts of the track that you then put into a full track, where are you finding inspiration from all these different things that you're putting together? Like you're layering the lyrics and the sound and everything. Like you said, some of them maybe have been samples from other artists or remixed, but where are you getting this inspiration from?
So that song actually didn't make the cut for Goat to Market because I didn't have the the licensing to be able to use Timbaland's music. However, all the beats were custom made for me, working with my creative director and our producer. No AI generation in this, not in the lyrics, not in the beats themselves. All the lyrics 100% written by me. And all the raps 100% delivered and performed by me. The creative process was a pretty cool back and forth with the three of us, myself, our creative director, and the producer. Basically, like, I'd have an idea for a song and I'd be like, I kind of need the beat to go something like this, and I'd just like make a voice note and like hum it or like do 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 something like that. And then what I would do, the creative director and I, after we'd talk about that, then we would create a collaborative Spotify playlist of other songs that mirror the energy or the vibe that we want to go for this song. And then we would package those two things up together and send that to the producer. And then the producer would come back with like 3 ideas or like three examples for like what that song could be. And then we'd iterate from there and pick the one and then build on top of it.
Okay, so long story short, get a producer to help you with it, but give them a creative brief almost.
Yeah. I think here's what I think, like with a lot of content that you're not going to 100% make yourself, like, and I'm talking about whether it's written, if you need like a logo created for your company or a creative, right? Stuff like that. If it's going to go to another person, whether that's, outsourcing to a platform, to an agency, to a service, to a team member, the more direction you can give up front, usually the better. Like, for our company, the Startup Hype Man logo, if you've seen that, it's a pretty strong logo. We kind of modeled it off the Air Jordan logo, but it's me jumping with a microphone in the other direction. Now, I had that designed for $20 on Fiverr or Upwork. But here's the thing. I knew to a T how I wanted. Like, I could see in my head. I just didn't have the skill myself to do it. So the more clear direction you're able to give, and I'm not saying there aren't talents out there who you can just kind of like blue sky it with and they'll be amazing. That does exist. But I think one of your earlier things, you kind of held up like your hand, like things cost money, right? If you're going to do things on a budget and go, the outsourced route that costs less money, the less you rely on them to create your vision, the better it'll be. If you want them to figure out your vision, you're probably going to be disappointed and have a lot of frustration along the way. If you know your vision and you can articulate that to them, and their job is to just kind of go to work from there, maybe a couple follow-up questions, but they can just go to work, you're going to have a really good output at the end of the day.
I think it's really true of like all creative production in a way. If you don't have that sort of what is your brand voice, what does it sound like? What are your principles and the look and the feel and the macro kind of brand level? If you don't have that written down and if you can't articulate that to any length or in any detail, the process just becomes so much longer because they're having to do that discovery phase with you. So, we always talk about briefing on this podcast as a really important step. And I think it's really important. But if you don't have that skill set or that background into at least understanding what that person is doing at an elementary level, maybe you should hire someone to help articulate that first for you so that when it comes to briefing them and the finished production, when you go to hire an agency or a producer to do something and to execute, it just becomes so much easier. And I think a lot of people see these two things as one and the same. And that's kind of where I see these projects dragging out a bit.
I think it's knowing your skill set, right? And the more you can parse down the micro skills within that to know, okay, here's what I can own, here's what I can't own, then you figure out how you collaborate the right way.
I should go on vacation, but recently these VCs sneakily screening me like push notifications, and it's no motivation. I'm going coast to coast just to have doors close in my faces. Cards face up and I'm showing them aces. They say they ready to disrupt, but they so into stasis.
And on this track as well, I know you've used some of this music you said in intros to some of your events and other things. So what advantages do you find around when you use this music versus maybe if you didn't use this music like other people? Is it a differentiating factor for you, like a bit of a branding thing, or does it actually help you to sell an idea or a product? How have you seen that environment really switch the light on in the room and then convert people and people like really animatic and just I want whatever Raj has? Is there any studies or split tests or anything you've done on that?
I haven't done any split tests, but just anecdotally. So one of the songs on the album is called the NXT. That beat we have used several times to start webinars as people are entering the room. So this entire year almost, or this whole summer rather, at least this whole summer, we've used that. We probably did a dozen webinars and each one used that as the lead beat. Just first few minutes as people are settling in, as they're entering, as you're, asking them to drop their name in the chat, that kind of stuff. But you'll notice without even prompting them, they will comment and be like, oh, this is vibes. Oh, this, I feel good. I'm ready to learn now. Right. So it's just a nice way to gather some attention of without having to be okay, everybody pay attention and be like a teacher or a professor about it. People just start paying attention. So I think, that's really valuable in that respect. There are other ways, audio can be explored as well. If it's not going to be how you lead in a webinar, because I'll say this, just last point on the lead of a webinar, it's very awkward when it's just silence and people are entering and the host is like, okay, we'll get started in a couple seconds. Yeah, we're just waiting for everyone to come in. Yep. Okay, thank you. Remember to adjust your settings so your chat message goes to everyone, not just to the host and the panelists, right? And the funny thing is, you can say those same things, but when there's music behind it, now it just has a different energy. And I will do that, right? I'll host a webinar. I'll be like, you'll have different energy as the host because there's music, but then it won't feel so strict or even just dry or boring, right? You got this beat playing and you're like, what's up everybody, we're about to get started, have a seat, settle in, grab your coffee, grab your beer, grab your milk wherever you are in the world based on your time zone, grab your lunch, grab your dinner, let me know in the chat where you're tuning in from. And then and people already, even before you say that, are already, again, they're typing in there oh, I'm feeling relaxed now, or I'm feeling jazz. This is great. I love this music. Where's this beat from? That kind of thing. But then I think the other point I was going to make is you could also use some of the, this idea of audio. You could also use it for in between of content. It doesn't just have to be the start or the end. For example, I've toyed around before with, if you're familiar with the Hamilton musical, it's super popular in America. Big inspiration for me. One of my favorite just creative works ever. I built an entire webinar on how to create really strong sales presentations And I came up with that concept, like with the format, by modeling it off of the Hamilton musical's storytelling structure. And that's how I built kind of our own proprietary model for how to build a compelling sales deck. And in the webinar teaching that, I incorporate clips from the musical as we're talking about different points, right? So I might have like the first part of the opening song queued up for like slide 7. And that's a way, like, halfway through to get people like reinvested, because now they're like, wait, what? If they started like looking at a different browser tab. When it comes to content, my philosophy is you can create content or you can create can't sleep content. Can't sleep content is so different or unique or engaging or compelling or just like shock value, whatever it is. It's so insert adjective here that the person who has consumed it or who is consuming it quite literally can't go to sleep that night until they have talked to someone else about it or some version of that, right? Like a good example would be, I have an actual email in my inbox from a VC who I sent the album to. And within like 20 minutes, his reply was, dude, this is so fire. I was planning to play this as my background music while working, but now I had to stop everything and do nothing but listen to this. It's that good. Right? I'm flattered and floored by that compliment. But that's an example of can't sleep. His version of can't sleep was, I can't even continue working because I have to just invest myself in this right now. And that's the thing, right? How do you turn heads? How do you stop people in their tracks? I'm not saying everyone should go out here and create a hip hop album. Most people shouldn't, in fact. But how do you take the assets you already have? How do you take the engagements you're already doing and just turn the dial up a little bit on them to make someone be like, well, that's different. I haven't seen it delivered that way before, or that was cool. They used music in that, or whatever the thing might be.
Funny, I was just at a wedding actually, and maybe a month ago in Melbourne, and look, the MC was the DJ for the wedding, and it was a completely different vibe. Like, this person could actually command the room and knew how to work or knew the right things to say. And then he laid on top all his musical skills and, getting the right track or the background music from people coming up to speak and everything. And, especially when you're at a wedding, some of the speeches can be a bit of stage fright with all of the attendance and the dinner. And the way he used the music and his command of the room, it just made everyone just disarm them. And when they come up to start talking, that whole barrier of being shy or afraid to do public speaking, it was just killed it. And the wedding was way more relaxing. People were more relaxed on stage, and then they ended up giving better speeches that were more genuine. So I just found that was really good. And another example that I've noticed recently, because I just got back from Melbourne, on the plane, on the deplaning, or as you're entering the plane, they play music tracks. So yeah, this is Virgin, but you've got Virgin Atlantic. It's Virgin here is one of our domestic carriers, kind of like United or Delta.
I never knew that. I never knew Virgin was also in Australia.
Yeah, so getting on the plane, it was a pretty stressful time for a lot of people, and trying to put the bags up there, and everyone's jostling for positions and everything, and they play this kind of music to calm everybody down when you're onboarding. And I found that was really interesting from a CX perspective. And then when you land, they do the same thing as well. So they're listening to the music, and it sort of calms everyone down, and then it's a better experience for everyone, I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard something like that before. Another good example of something like that is, they're only a domestic airline here in the US, but Southwest Airlines, they've become really popular because they have lower fares and there's no check bag fees, and they're not, but they're also not like a budget airline to where you have to pay just to have pay to go through the gate, like some of those airlines that exist, pay to access the airport, those things. But I think Southwest has a really good culture as a company where their employees, feel empowered in whatever way to just have fun and connect with passengers. So, you'll see a lot of YouTube clips or Instagram videos. And I've been on flights like this myself before, where the flight's going to take off and they will do the safety reading in a Looney Tunes character voice, or, when the plane lands and they're trying to tell you about like, the process for deplaning, they'll turn it into almost like a stand-up comedy routine. Those are the things that, to come back to the point from before, there's the norm, right? there's the standard way of doing it, and that's how everyone can do it. And then there's going a step above to get someone, the Southwest example is the version of can't sleep content there is people on the plane, they start to take out their phone and record the voiceover because they're like, oh, I got to share this with my friends, or I got to post this online.
You love that. I think that sort of culture really starts at the core, at the top of the organizational hierarchy, if you know what I mean, and then it filters down from there. And then, Norm at Southwest, he gave permission, I think, everyone to do that. And he's obviously not with the airline anymore, but I think that sort of DNA and that sort of permission for people to express themselves really still runs throughout the whole airline. And yeah, look it up. It's the Rumble, Southwest Airlines Rumble and something. Also, you do a lot of pitching. So you help founders craft a better pitch to investors. Can you just run me where that came from? And if you want to give a really quick rundown, I know there's a lot of nuance to it, but what is your process to a better pitch?
Yeah, so the premise of Startup Hype Man is there's just the notion that we talk to so many founders and company leaders who suffer from what we call rush hour syndrome. If you've ever seen the Chris Tucker, Jackie Chan movie Rush Hour, where he says, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Right, that classic scene. That's what a lot of these people find themselves in when it comes to presenting their company, right? They have this big picture idea in their head of the way the world is supposed to be because of their great product. But then when they pitch, they are getting people scratching their heads, looking confused and saying, huh, what is it again? Or I think even worse, the reaction they get is, oh, I get it. Another insert generic app, right? Which I think that's even an even worse response. And, when the stakes are this high, when you're out there trying to raise capital or go to market, you really can't afford to be another anything. You got to be the only you. And that's where we come in, and we, to use the branding again, we help these companies become, as we like to say, the goat to market. And we do that through helping them figure out the right pitch that's going to stand out and stand apart, so their audience recognizes them not as the best, but as the only. And when you are seen as the only, the confused looks turn into people writing checks, whether that's investors or customers.
Yo, Patagoniavest, what's up, man?
Me?
Yeah, you come over here, bro. What brings you here?
I'm just trying to network. I created an app. I'm trying to meet some like-minded founders.
Oh, a founder, huh?
Yeah.
What'd you find, man?
What did I find? Yeah. I created an app. It's called Book League. We have 1 million users. Ooh. Just trying to encourage the habit of reading.
Oh, that's cool, man. 1 million users. That's real traction. That's cool, yeah. You want some funding?
What?
Some funding, dog. You want some money in your pocket or what?
Not really. I was trying to bootstrap this myself.
Psh, bootstrap it. Come on, bro. Let me get you some of this funding. Make everything way easier. You want to scale, don't you?
I do want to scale, but I want to do it myself, and I don't want to lose equity.
Fuck all that. Come on, man. Let me get you some of this funding, man. You're going to want to be able to acquire customers faster. You're going to be able to make real moves like a boss. They call it dry powder, man, and you're going to need this dry powder so your shit can blow up. So come on, let me get you a little taste of this funding. Let me set up a couple meetings. Come on.
All right, man. Just a taste, though.
So on that, though, I noticed in the previous podcast, and I've had this trouble as well, just like explaining what it is you do as a company can be really hard, especially if it's something quite new or niche or extremely technical. So to answer that question is really difficult. And, I've experienced lots of work in teams and clients that I've consulted that have this issue. A really good litmus test for me is that if you go to an event and people go, oh, so what do you do? Or, what does your company do? And you're like, well...
And you end up more confused than before you even knew anything about it.
It's sort of like a scene from Silicon Valley, the TechCrunch scene, and all these people are coming up on to pitch their startups, and they say something very technical, like we're using AI and data lake systems to XYZ, blah blah blah, and then at the end they all finish with, because the crowd gives them no sort of joy when they say that, they go, oh, Well, we're making the world a better place, and everyone cheers.
Yeah. And the crowd goes crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of like a running joke, but you got something very technical like that. This is my technique anyway, but I want to know how you sort of attack this. But I sort of just look back into, okay, the 5 whys. So if they say something technical, our product does XYZ, I go, well, why is that important? And then they say something else and they go, well, why do they need that? Or why is that an issue? Or why is that important? And they sort of like drill down. And, once I get to about 5 levels or something, I sort of get to the root value elements there, and then sort of work those and reverse engineer those back up into like the messaging strategy. And it's pretty simple, but you're combining benefits and cost reduction sometimes as well. And you can recraft it back into the pyramid. So you go from top level all the way down to a bit more specific at the bottom. But I really want to know, like, what do you do?
The first thing is the less technical, the better, particularly the more technical your company actually is. The best example I think of this is take any company that's building on blockchain. I promise you the first thing out of their mouth you will hear is, we're a blockchain enabled whatever. And my response to that is always, for the rest of us who are not building our products on blockchain, you don't hear us starting with, we're hosted on AWS or we're hosted on Google Cloud. So blockchain's a function. It's not the end all be all. Don't at me on that. Now, the hierarchy in which to speak. So when you asked me about, hey, what does Startup Hype Man do? And I gave you that rush hour thing. Like I told you a 60-second story there. I mean, you tell me, did it sound kind of off the cuff? Or did it sound natural enough?
Yeah, it did, but I'm sure that's not the first time you said that, all right?
That is my company's elevator pitch I just gave you. And that's something I know exactly. I can say it naturally because I know it really well. That's what I tell any entrepreneur, any marketer, any seller. Know what you want to say well, so it doesn't sound scripted ever or rehearsed. But I bet if I looked at our document of what is our elevator pitch, I said it. I probably maybe changed 5 words, but I otherwise said it to a T. And I follow a very specific structure, which is the formula we teach founders and sales teams for their marketing, or for their elevator pitch, is the formula is called Que Pasa. If anyone knows Spanish, Que Pasa means what's up or what's happening. And that's really what you're supposed to do, is just tell people what's up with your company. And PASA is the acronym out of that. So the Que Pasa elevator pitch formula is PASA, problem, approach, solution, action. So when I gave you mine there, I led when I was like, hey, like the whole gist of this thing is that we talk to these founders every day who suffer from this rush hour syndrome, right? And I talked through that being the problem, and then how it's leading to people being confused, and people being confused leads to them not knowing what they do or categorizing them the wrong way and not writing checks. Approach is, it's a problem and then approach. Approach is like the catchy one-liner that's almost like your ultimate brand promise to your audience. So in this case, I said, hey, we help these founders become the goat to market. So that's our approach, become the goat to market. Then the solution, I talked about, we do this pitch development. I said, hey, it's really pitches designed to stand out and stand apart. And so they go from looking confused to writing checks. And then action is just kind of like the call to action. Like, how do you carry the conversation forward from there? Do you, what do you ask them? Like, what do you want them to do? That's going to, kind of modify based on the situation. But I didn't necessarily, I knew in that moment, in an upfront introduction, I could have told you our entire 5-6 step process in building a pitch. What's the pitch kit we create for clients, all that stuff. I chose to go high level with our solution because in hearing it for the first time, I know you can only absorb so much information. So I'm going to intentionally go light and say just enough to generate interest for someone to then say, okay, wait, tell me more about that. And that's my opportunity to still not go deep into the technology if I was had a tech product, but to talk more about kind of why the solution makes sense, more about, who it's for and how it connects to the audience, and, ultimately what is the thing it actually does.
Yeah, and then like the next step from there would be, okay, you want to go a bit deeper, maybe talking to a head of tech or something, and then you start talking about some of the underlying infrastructure, how it integrates with other systems and things like that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, depending on like if you're talking to a tech person, like a technical person, and they want that information, go for it. Otherwise, anyone who's running a tech startup right now, I promise you, the majority of people do not want to know like your flow chart of your tech stack and how someone goes from login to, you know, result.
Yeah, because everyone pitches in reverse. They start with that and then they go back up the layers in reverse. It's kind of like their pyramid sort of writing principle. It's really funny.
Right. And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of pitch decks. You know, we'll work on pitch decks, but we'll see the original one that they had first. And it's amazing how many startups and entrepreneurs think that it's necessary to tell someone else, like show the step of a user getting their login credentials. Like, no, duh, that's going to be part of the process. Why are you wasting headspace and real estate on your slide with that information? It's totally unnecessary. We understand that in order for someone to be a user on this platform, they have to be a user on the platform. Don't talk to me about that.
Hey, so speaking about pitch decks, this is something I wanted to ask you because back in the day, like how some of these original decks from Uber and other very famous companies, they're always floating around on LinkedIn. I've posted some before as well, but they sort of go, hey, this is the deck that, you know, raised $1 billion, and then so there's a unicorn at the end of that, and I'm like, okay, that's really cool. And I sort of got drawn into it at the beginning. I'm like, I'm going to deconstruct, you know, is there any similarities between these winning sort of pitch decks? But then I sort of thinking about, you know, is this survivorship bias here that we have to be careful of? And then I sort of saw that, oh, a lot of these people that end up pitching successfully and getting lots of funding, they were people that were known to their investors, or that was like their second sort of rodeo. Although the PayPal mafia, for example, that come from a successful startup and now obviously had a network, and then there's a lot of inherent sort of trust there. So I was just really cautious about analyzing the pitch deck versus are we buying into the personal brand of the person who's actually transferring trust to the audience.
Yeah. Like the Airbnb deck isn't actually that good, right? It's like built on like Microsoft Paint.
Yeah, it's like clip art or something. It's really bad. So like, I'm just saying, you know, how important is the pitch deck and getting the narrative right versus ignoring all that sort of meta brand level factors of the founders themselves?
I mean, if you've got a lot of good connections, you're coming from a strong exit somewhere else, obviously that helps. And perhaps the pitch deck is less important. I think for the 99% of those who don't have that as their background, the pitch deck is really important. And it's not that you necessarily will bring it out in every meeting and straight go through the pitch, but what it is functionally doing for you is getting the story straight, at least for yourself, so that you can talk about it, whether it's in a structured like slide for slide setting or a casual coffee meeting where the deck never comes out and you need to be talking about your company and know what are the different stories I need to pull out in talking about this. That's why it's so important to get the narrative from start to finish figured out. Otherwise you end up, and this is what we have a lot of our founders end up happening to them when they come, but when they come to us is like, I'm on version 84 of my pitch deck because I keep making a tweak here and a tweak there and whatever. And the idea is get this one master pitch figured out, and you might tailor it to the situation, but you're not revising it so heavily every time. And really the tailoring is almost more like you picked up some traction, so you adjusted a number, those kinds of things, or you got a new learning, so you added that into the deck. But we literally had someone show us their desktop, and it was just like one of our clients before they were to us, they screen shared their desktop, and the entire desktop was filled with PowerPoint files. And I don't know how many you can fit on that desktop, probably 90 plus. And it was literally all like brand name, pitch deck, V1.5, D, V1.7, V3.2.
Yeah, funny. I just had that experience recently, actually, with another founder. And it was the same sort of thing with that. They'd been obsessing over this thing for months, right? And then, like, every time they showed me the deck, it was getting longer and longer and bigger. And then it sort of loses its meaning because it's trying to include everything in there. And then you end up looking and reading and going, it's just too complex. I need something a bit simpler, and it sort of loses its power in a way. It loses that essence of the storytelling or the power of the pitch. So, and then everything didn't flow together either because they kept inserting new slides in the presentation. I was speaking to another mate who does keynote presentations, and he was like, "I always just start with the story, and I start with how I want to make them feel at the end of the presentation, and then I reverse engineer that back into a narrative, and then I fill in the slides and the text and the images and everything else." So it's a very much a reverse process, like any good marketing in a way. It doesn't start with a PowerPoint template or researching other decks that have won anything or successfully raised money. So I suppose my question to you is like, is there a common mistake you see all the time when it comes to pitching that you wish people didn't go down that road, or just something that they need to be aware of, so that if people are doing this, like, hey, reach out to a professional, like, don't do that?
Yeah, I mean, whether you reach out to a professional or just figure it out on your own, I think you shouldn't start by opening up PowerPoint or opening up slides. In our process, we use just like a Word document or a Google document first and start outlining things before we ever go to slides. There's too much pressure to figure out what to say that has to be perfect, I think, if you start with the blank white canvas that is slides. Because now, and also you're mashing two different creative processes together into one thing. Even if you're just planning to write a header or a title on each slide and bullet points underneath that, your brain is thinking about visual creativity. Even if it's not great visual creativity, it's thinking about visual creativity when it should be thinking about what's the idea I'm trying to get across, what's the feeling, what's the story that needs to be told. The person you're referencing, I think that's fantastic if the first thing they think about is what's the emotion. That's something that I heavily subscribe to as well, because the idea, one of the lessons we teach is don't think like an entrepreneur, think like an entertainer. Because an entertainer just cares about making that emotional connection with their audience and getting them to feel something. And then the musician on stage or the band curates the set list really around like, where do we want to take them? What emotion do we want them walking away with by the end of this set? And funny enough, for our release party for the album, we're doing like a 12, 13 song set list. We're doing the whole album and more. But what do you think I did? I included the songs and I constructed the order of the songs based on what energy do I want them walking out of here with.
Yep. So with any creative production, right, like producing is the first hurdle, but I think then getting that in front of people, like into their attention and the branding, into their mind, and getting to stay there and reinforce that is the main struggle. Like, I think when people create content, that I use this like 80-20 rule, but a lot of people get this in reverse. They spend 80% of the resources producing it and 20% promoting or distributing it. I think for me, it's almost the opposite. You need almost 4 times as much for the distribution and the promotion, especially if you don't have those assets in the background, like, a big letter, a newsletter, or a big social following or whatever. If you don't have that, it's going to be very expensive, and you don't have that trust. So otherwise, no one's going to see it. So in your experience, say we've created this pitch and we're going to create the audio assets or whatever, how important is distribution? How do you go about doing that?
I think the biggest mistake to make is to assume people are paying attention the first time you say something. If I go back to my previous business, the podcast that we launched with that, like we announced it in our newsletter, and like 2 weeks ago by, and I was like, wait, why is no one listening to this? And I was like, oh, well, I don't know how we came to the realization. We should probably tell them again that it exists and keep reminding them that it exists. And then people started to, listen and download as we kept reminding them. So that, I think that's true, whether it's this album now, whether it's a podcast, whether it's anything. It's like, if you want people to pay attention, you got to say it loudly and you got to say it often. So with our release for the Go-to-Market album, it's kind of pulling together a few different things over these first few weeks. So we have our own distribution channels, which is email, newsletter, and primarily LinkedIn. And I'm using like my own personal social media, like Instagram and Twitter and stuff as well. That's the owned channels. And then on top of that, we did, we're doing this whole release party and hype week stuff too.
Yeah, I saw that actually. Sorry, I can't make it. It's a bit too far away, but it looks really good. I saw the promo, and then you kind of did this, and almost it's sort of like an artist doing music, sort of like a festival, right?
Yeah, like a music festival, right? Yeah, that's how like we did the graphics for it because that's the idea, right? It's celebration of the tech community. Let's give it this music festival vibe. And there's some pretty, like I want to say oddball, but there's like unique events in the week. So we've got there's the highlight is the concert, the release party, but we also have an event called Venture Hoops, which is we're bringing together several venture capitalists and venture partners in our ecosystem for along with one of our clients called Swish House, which is a basketball fitness class, and we're doing networking, but like it's a networking event, but in a contained basketball fitness class. So it's like, we're going to be teammates and athletes together, and then we'll hang out afterwards. Like that's one of the events. We also have a morning fun run and walk along the lakefront in Chicago. We have a watch party for a big football game. There's a private dinner event. So we're being pretty unique with the different events that are happening during the week. So there's just kind of something, there's like a little bit for everyone, and you kind of like build your own lineup, if you will. Now, that part aside, coming back to just like that all of that helps influence downloads to the album because it's kind of all tied back to that. But in addition, we look at the relationships we've developed over the years, and we look to distribution, other assets for distribution. So one example is Vidyard has the sales technology video company. They spun off a media brand called SalesFeed, which is really just, it's entertaining and educational content for salespeople. I happen to be one of the talent people on the talent roster to create SalesFeed content. What I do, reached out to the SalesFeed team and was like, can we promote the album in the next SalesFeed newsletter? And the day of this recording, it came out in their newsletter this morning. Reached out to other people, Devin Reed with, he's the head of content at a company called Clary, but he also has built his own strong personal brand called The Reader. He's got like a 9,000 or 10,000 person email list that every Saturday he writes to. What did he feature last Saturday? He featured the album. So we look at these relationships we've developed over the years, and what you'll see again over the next month or so is this rollout of people mentioning it in their, in their assets, whether it's their post online or whether it's their newsletter. So now what happens each time a new person does that is it amplifies the message, but in two ways. It amplifies it to the new person who hasn't heard of this yet, gets it in front of them. But also, if you're subscribed to Devin's newsletter, you might also be subscribed to the SalesFeed newsletter. And if you didn't take action on the SalesFeed or on Devin's one, maybe now you're going to take action on SalesFeed's one because you're seeing it another time. And then on our side, we just continue to promote it through our asset, right? Like the album came out, we're doing this recording on Wednesday, September 20th. The album came out on September 14th, so 6 days ago. Every day I've been sending an email with stuff in it and also saying, by the way, stream the album now. And I'm also collecting the feedback I'm getting, and that becomes repurposable content to be like, look at the review, like the reviews are in. This is amazing. People are saying this about it. And I will say I'm also, I'm screenshotting these things because it's my rainy day folder when I'm feeling crappy about myself. And I'm like, oh no, that's cool though. I impacted this person this way. They had this nice compliment, this nice thing to say about me.
I love it. It's just really funny because I think people forget the repetition side of things with distribution. They're just the hard grind of promoting yourself. Like, people do it once and they sort of give up. But for me, you can't just blast it out once. You got to follow up. My most popular episode on this podcast, actually, speaking about distribution, there was this interview with Flavia Babat. She's an editorial content writer, the editor of Branding Mag. And anyway, the point is, she basically she does content professionally as well, obviously. So she kind of knew what to do. So it was a bit easier. But I provided her with all the assets, and then she repurposed that, like the images and the quotes and everything in her face, and then maybe took a small video clip and rehashed it, or took a little snippet of text from the transcription that I gave her, and then did tweets and repurposed it, and she just did that for like 2 or 3 months. Like every week there's another thing, and I just saw the podcast listens like go up another 10, another 15, like every time she did that, or 20 or 30 or whatever. And then because she did it for so long, it then created this gravitas, and then everyone else is tagging, going, "Hey, this episode is awesome." And then it became number one. So just I think that sometimes that hard grind people don't really understand, and it gets overlooked. So that's distribution for me as well. So what are your plans then after this album party? Like, how are you going to measure success?
It's a good question. I don't know if I actually really sat down and think about what are the KPIs, but my first plan is to exhale and take a day off after hype weekends. I have been working day and night on overdrive and just stressed out to the max, planning this whole thing and doing the marketing and all that stuff. People are already kind of being like, oh, is this going to be an annual thing? And I'm like, well, we'll see. Right. Year one, I'm more concerned about experience over attendance. Obviously we want people there. We want good numbers, but I'm looking more to, are we creating something that the people who come say, I want to come back for that? I can't believe I got to experience that. That was so cool. Let's do it again. Because that'll create the groundswell if we're going to do it again another time. There are some just minimum attendance benchmarks we want to hit, which we will, based on how it's going right now. But I think to obsess over maxing out attendance to everything is the wrong thing for right now. I'd rather we deliver something that, again, is can't sleep worthy for slightly less people than be overwhelmed because we can't actually handle the higher number of people, and then it's a bad experience. And then the next time we want to do something, people are like, I'm not going to go back. They hosted something that was terrible.
So you basically create your own festival, like a mini SSXW or something, right? Like,
I mean, that's a lofty comparison, but if we can get it to something like that, that'd be cool. Yeah. But the idea really is, it's a mini festival, right? And, we're doing a little bit different where it's not like it's day-long events or conferences. It's like, hey, there are individual events happening throughout the week. And then, we formed the right partnerships to pull this off. So for example, some of the people who are coming to these things, this is all happening in Chicago. Some people might live in the suburbs. Some people are coming in from out of state for this. So what do you need? You need a place for them to go when there's not an event happening. So we were fortunate to form a partnership with a co-working space called Bond Collective, and they're the official co-working partner for Hype Week. So that means they're hosting one of the events, but also anyone who has a ticket to any event during the week can go to Bond Collective, show their ticket, and co-work from there for the day, any of the days of the week. And it's not like you only get to use it one time. You can use it all 5 days if you want. And you don't have to have 5 unique tickets. You should have one ticket to one event, and you can co-work there for as much or as little of the week as you want. And so now that helps, right? If someone's going to take a train in from the suburbs, maybe they decide, if I'm going to go to the taco happy hour on Tuesday, maybe I'll get there. I'll come in at like 2:00 or noon, work for the day, and then just walk over to where the event is happening. And at the same time, now it gives Bond Collective exposure, and maybe they start thinking, this is where we look at how do we provide value to the partners, not just how do we extract value, right? My goal is, in that respect, is I want people to experience Bond Collective and then be like, maybe I should inquire about getting a membership here.
Yeah, I like that, because that's exactly what I would do, especially if I was going to stay for a little while. Like, I could stay at a hotel or whatever, but I don't want to stay at a crummy hotel for you and do work there. It's always sort of awkward, Like, I'd rather go somewhere else.
Yeah, that, or like the desk in your that's the desk in your hotel room with the bed behind you, and it's hard to move the chair because it's carpet, right? Yeah, no vibes. Why not? Why not use it as create the opportunity for networking the entire week, because there's just there's a hub people can go to.
Speaking of this, is there a book you've read recently that has changed your thinking for the better?
Recently, I don't know, because I'm really not a great reader. It takes me forever to read a book, and I don't read them that often.
Maybe not a book then. Maybe a music track or something you've listened to that you've taken lots of inspiration from?
Ooh, that's a good question. There has been, this album has a lot of influences in it. The song Dry Powder is very heavily influenced by me obsessively listening to Pusha T for like a year straight. The song The NXT is heavily influenced by listening to some Drake. So all of those things exist. Even before this album, though, I'll come back to what I said earlier. The Hamilton musical really fundamentally like changed so much for me and influenced me so much that I, at the time back in 2016, I created my own little like covers and remix Hamilton album. I created a yoga class. I also happen to teach yoga. I created a yoga class called Hamel Flow that was yoga set to the music, but the poses are sequenced to the lyrics and the music. But then even just in a more philosophical sense or a more kind of creativity sense, what I saw them do with that musical moved me so much because it was fire hip hop, great music top to bottom, whether it was singing or rapping, and a really good story being told about, a topic I care about, which is United States history. And when I saw like that showed me what's possible if you want to start to like merge worlds together. And that's, as I've built Startup Hype Man over the years, that's kind of the path I've taken is I've merged different worlds together. And this album, I think, is a really good output of the influence of Hamilton. It gave me permission to say, maybe I can try to do a niche that is hip hop. It's founder rap, right? No one's done that before, but maybe I can make founder rap a thing.
Okay, what about favorite website resource that you'll reluctantly share with the listeners?
Oh, you know what I am obsessed with, and we've, my team's even now built content on top of it, is the newsletter is called Charter, CHARTR.co is the website. Don't misspell it because I think it takes you to like a porn site or something like that. CHARTR.co is the website. They do really good visualization of data.
Yeah, I'm subscribed to that actually. The graphs and everything. Yeah, it's really good.
Nice. Yes. And they really we use Charter as we lean on Charter as a strong resource to stay on top of trends happening across industries. Their newsletter comes a couple times a week and it's like 3 micro stories of, everything from video game sales to, MGM Casino getting a cyber attack on their, on their entire servers to other things. And again, we use that really as very much as one of our go-to resources, if not the go-to resource, to make sure because our job in building these pitches is to not just know the business, but know the industries as well. And so this helps us just keep a pulse on things. And then sometimes we'll see something and we'll go down a rabbit hole and research that, that thing a little bit more, that trend or that story a little bit more. So Charters, and again, don't misspell it, CHARTR.co.
Okay, what about a piece of tech you can't do without because it helps you do your job better? So it could be hardware or software.
Yeah, I mean, hey, a microphone does help me do my job better, that's for sure. You know what? Yeah, let me go with that because I'm pretty big on making sure the presentation aspect is always strong. It's rare you'll see me do a webinar like off my laptop from my home. If that's the case, it's really because I don't know, I had to be home that day because there was like a worker coming to the house. Otherwise, you'll see me in my office here in this setting. I'm very intentional about the background here, and then I want the audio to come through clean. So yeah, let's give a nod to the Shure MV. I think it's the MV7 mic that I'm using. Yeah, Shure MV7.
What's your best quote or meme that makes you laugh every time because it's so true?
I don't know if I see it all the time, but I did see this meme the other day that was like, isn't it amazing how we've just normalized the plight of humanity? And then it was like, that was like someone's tweet. And then the reply to that was someone being like, oh, dead on. It's amazing how many times I see some like crazy thing happen or some climate event happen. And I'm just like, yep, I guess that's what happens to empires. They fall every now, they fall after a while. And then it's like I say that, and then one click later, as I'm shopping for dog hats on Amazon.
You've kind of already talked about what you do, but if someone doesn't know you, who are you, what do you do, and how do people get in contact with you?
We help startups not suck at how they pitch themselves so they can raise capital and go to market. You can find us at startuphypeman.com. Reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, Rajiv Nathan, or type in Raj Nation, all one word should show up. And be sure to listen to the album. Goat to Market is out, streaming everywhere. It's on Spotify, Apple Music. If you happen to be a Tidal listener or YouTube Music listener, like it's on all these platforms, give it a listen. And if you like it, let me know. Shoot me a note.
Okay, thanks very much, Raj, for your time today. Really appreciate it and love the album. All the best. And sorry I can't make it to the event. I really want to come. But anyway, thanks again for having a chat. Really appreciate it.
You'll be there in spirit. And we'll give that champagne toast to you at the end of the night.
Check his Facebook. 3 steps they trying to figure his ascension. Investigate his figures, see he's building from his senses. 4th step, en la puerta no está abierta. Ojos en la salida, así cuánto cuesta.